Hello everyone, welcome to this session on design thinking, where we say design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation anchored in understanding customer needs, rapid prototyping, and generating creative ideas. So traditionally, we used to come up with innovative products and services by using our own assumptions or whatever we think is needed. But currently, the world is going through different transformations where now innovation is being developed based on the human-centered approach, like the customer or the user is at the center of the design process. And design thinking is one of the tools that is used to enable this. So it is really based on the understanding of the customer or the user needs, but also creating a prototype, but then having different iterations and testing phases until the product or service is at its best. So design thinking transforms the way we develop products, services, processes, and organizations, just as I explained earlier. So by using design thinking, you make decisions based on what customers really want instead of relying on historical data or making risky bets based on instinct instead of evidence. So as I said this earlier, before we used to come up with products and services based on our assumptions. You go to a community and you just say, you look at them and you say, I think these people need X, but basically maybe that's not what they need. So design thinking brings together what is desirable from a human point of view. So what is desirable by the customer or by the user with what is technological feasible and economically viable. So when we talk about design thinking, there are three main components that are put into consideration. First is desirability. What makes sense to people and for people? Like what do they want? Uh, what do they want and what problem is it solving for them? And then the second one is feasibility. What is technological possible within the feasible foreseeable future? So for instance, you can come up with a solution. It is, yes, solving a certain problem, but maybe the technology that you use, people cannot really use it. For instance, there are people who have developed cars. Yes, maybe cars are needed, and then they have used their local technology to come up with a car. But that car cannot even go fast. It goes very slow because of the technology that has been used, which means now it is not feasible. And then viability. What is likely to become part of the sustainable business model? Like, can you sell that product? Because at the end of the day, we don't innovate for the sake of admiring the innovation. We innovate for the sake of building a business model out of it. So it needs to be something that people need. It needs to be technologically feasible, meaning that using technologies that people can easily adopt. And then it needs to be viable, meaning that we can create a business out of it. So as mentioned, you must have an intersection between desirability, feasibility, and viability. That is when innovation comes in. So design thinking process is a non-linear iterative process that is used to understand users, challenge assumptions, and redefine problems and create innovative solutions to prototype and testing. So it's non-linear. There are different stages of the innovation of the design thinking process, but being non-linear means you don't have to move from one stage to another. Sometimes you can start one stage, move to the next, go back, and that means the iteration. So it helps us understand the challenges, redefine assumptions, but also shape and come up with prototype and test the prototype. So design thinking involves five phases where we have the empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and testing. So basically, these are the five stages of the design thinking process, where you have the empathize, which is where we develop a deep understanding of the challenge. And then we have define, where we clearly articulate the problem you want to solve. And then ideate, we brainstorm potential solutions, select and develop your solution. And then prototype, we design the prototype or series of prototypes to test all or part of the solution. And lastly, we test, where we engage in a continuous short cycle innovation process to continually improve your design. So now we're going to be looking at the 5 stages independently. So the first stage is empathize, where with empathize, this is the first stage of the design thinking process. So in this stage, you gain an empathetic understanding of the people you're trying to save and the problem you are trying to solve. So this is where you go to the community, you spend time with them, you understand what they do, but also you ask what problem they're going through, but you also observe. There are things that they won't say, but through your observation, you can see them. So this involves learning about the audience for whom you are designing. Find out who is the user of the product or service and what matters to them, because you're building the solution for them. You're not building it for yourself. So it also involves consulting experts to find out more about the area of concern. So for instance, if we take an example of someone who is going to solve a problem in a farmers community, maybe you understand that maybe production of maize has decreased, and then you want to go to the maize farmers to understand why has the production decreased. So you go and you spend time with them, you understand how they farm the maize, you observe the seeds that they use, you observe maybe the um, water that they depend on. You just look at what matters to them and what exactly is the problem, because the main issue could be production has decreased, but what is causing production to decrease? There could be many factors that are there, many problems that are there. So maybe you can also consult an expert, let's say extension officers, and find out like what is their opinion on why the production of maize has decreased. And maybe you can share with them, I have observed that maybe they use this kind of seeds. I have observed maybe the rain is not coming as expected. I have observed maybe there's so much sunshine that previously was not there. So you just gather different information from the community so that you can understand them, but also you can understand the situation, and also you can extract the different problems that they face. So all this is done through observation, engaging and empathizing with the people to understand their experiences and motivations, as well as immersing yourself in the physical environment so you can gain a deeper personal understanding of the issues involved. So empathize is crucial to a human-centered design process such as design thinking. So it allows design thinkers to set aside their own assumptions about the world in order to gain insights into users and their needs. So here is where you remove all your assumptions and then just concentrate on the users and their needs. So for the group assignment, I would like you, as we've chosen the community, so now this is where you go, interact with the community, ask them questions, and then identify the different problems that they are facing in that particular community. And then the second stage is define. Now, during the define stage, you put together the information that you have created and gathered during the empathize stage. So remember in the exercise, you did some observation, you asked some questions, you wanted to know what the problem they're facing. So you gather all this information and then you bring it out to the define stage. So this is where you will analyze your observations and synthesize them in order to define the core problem that you and your team have identified up in this point. So like all the problems that you identified during the empathize stage, you put them down. You should think to design the problem as a problem statement in human-centered manner. So this is just a way that you can define your problem in a human-centered manner. So the defined state will help the designer in your team to gather great ideas, establish features, functions, and other elements that will allow them to solve the problem, or at the very least allow users to resolve issues themselves with the minimum difficulty. So here is where, once I said, you list all the problems that you came up with, and then here is where you will select which problem do you think you can solve. So for instance, I was giving an example of visiting maize farmers, and then you identify they have a problem with seeds, they have a problem with climate, like the rainfalls are not coming on time, and then they have a problem with markets, and then they have a problem with knowledge on maize farming and all other aspects. So this is where you will choose. So for instance, in my case, I would choose the problem of not having access to knowledge, and that is what I will consider to be able to help them in that particular community. So in the define stage, you will start to process to the third, to proceed to progress to the third stage, which is ideate, by asking questions which can help you look for ideas for solutions by asking how might we. So how might we help with the seeds? How might we help with the climate? How might we help with the knowledge? Encourage teenage girls to perform. So this is just an example that I used in this particular slide, but now we are using the example of a farmer. So how can I solve this problem to the maize farmers? So now with the ideate, during the ideate now, it's where it's the third stage of the design thinking process, where designers are ready to start generating ideas. So in the empathize, in the empathize and define, you are now understanding the situation and identifying the problem. Now in ideate, it's where now we start generating ideas or solutions for that problem. So you have grown to understand your users and their needs in the empathize stage, and you have analyzed and synthesized your observation in the define stage, and ended up with a human-centered problem statement. So now you have a clear problem, or you've selected the main problem that you are going to solve. So with this solid background, you and your team members can start to think outside the box to identify new solutions to the problem statement you have created, and you can start to look for alternative ways of viewing the problem. So now, for instance, with the maize farmers, for me, maybe I've decided to choose the knowledge challenge, or I've decided to choose the climate challenge. So in the idea, now we come up with solutions. We come up with different ideas now of solving that problem. So there are hundreds of ideation techniques such as brainstorming, brainwriting, worst possible idea, and Scamper. So these are different methods that you can use to come up with ideas. So brainstorming and worst possible idea sessions are typically used to stimulate free thinking and to expand the problem space. So like once you want to come up with an innovative solution, you need also to come up with innovative ways of coming up with ideas. Like, don't just sit as a group and then say, I think we should da da da, I think we should da da da. All these ways can be used. So for instance, with brainstorming, this is when you can have maybe sticky notes, and everybody can write up the ideas they have, and then you put them on the wall, and then you come up and put all those similar ideas together. So at the end of the day, the idea that you're going to choose won't belong to one person, but it would really be an idea from the group. But also, what's possible idea? What is the most crazy idea that you can come up with? Because that most crazy idea is the one that will bring the most innovative solution. So brainstorming and worst possible idea sessions are typically used to stimulate free thinking and to expand the problem space. So it is important to get as many ideas or problem solutions as possible at the beginning of the ideation phase. So you can use these different techniques to come up with as many ideas as possible. Then next you go to prototype, because in the ideation process you'll come up with different ideas, but later you will choose one idea or one solution to the problem, and then this solution now you'll bring it to prototype stage. So this is the design team will now produce a number of inexpensive, scalable, and down versions of the product or service. So prototypes may be shared and tested within the team itself, in other departments, or on a small group of people outside the design team. So when you talk about the prototype, you came up with the idea or the solution. For instance, in my case, if I chose with the farmers that one of their problem is access to knowledge, so I come up with the idea of coming up with a digital platform that will help them get access to knowledge. So that is where I come up to the prototype and start now building that particular prototype. So you will design, you will start by drawing it, having the features around it, knowing that this particular solution will have the following features. You can have a sketch of how the integration of these features will be, and then you can share it even with the same community, go back to the community and share with them even before you build the solution now. Go and share with them that, okay, this is what I want to build for you. It will have these features, it will have this integration. Do you think it is going to help you? And then they will give you their comments. They'll tell you, that won't work for us, or that will work for us, but improve X, Y, and this. So you can build a prototype and then share it. So now when we build a prototype, we start from paper, where you have the prototype on paper, and then now you can start creating a digital prototype as well that can be shared with the community, but also it can be shared with other members of the team or other people in the department or within your class. And then, so a prototype is an experimental phase, and the aim is to identify the best possible solution for each of the problems identified during the 3 stages. So it's an experimental phase. So even when you're doing it, you're still not going to market. It's still a prototype, but just in the process of having people test it and improve it until you get the best version of the solution for the particular problem. So the solutions are implemented within the prototype, and one by one they are integrated and either accepted, improved, or re-examined or rejected on the basis of the user experience. So once you have the prototype, as I mentioned, you can take it back to the user, they can test it, they can give their comments, they can reject it, and that is how you will keep improving until your solution is on point. By the end of this stage, the design team will have a better idea of the constraints inherent to the product and the problems that are present, and have a clear view of how real users will behave, think, and feel when interacting with the product. So after you take them through that scenario, then at the end of the day, you'll come up with something that you know the product, the users will accept, but also you know how they will think, how they will feel, and how comfortable they will be with that product. After that, you have the product in place, you go for testing. So the designed product is then rigorously tested. This is the final stage of the 5-stage model, but in an iterative process, the results generated during the testing phase are often used to redefine one or more problems and inform the understanding of the user. The conditions of use, how people think, behave, and feel, and they empathize. So with the test phase, it means you go back, like as you're testing, you get feedback, just as I said with the prototype, you get the feedback, and sometimes it will take you back to the empathize stage. Sometimes it will take you back to the ideate. Sometimes, so testing helps you redefine and make your product to become better and make your product friendly to the user, so that at the end of the day it can be easy for them to accept it. So even during the phase, alterations and refinements are made in order to rule out problem solutions and desire and derive as deep an understanding of the product and its users as possible. So during this phase, iterations, you still go back and forth, making sure that the product is on point. So when we talk about iteration or design thinking being nonlinear, this is what it means. So you can always move from empathize to define, and then from define you could go to ideate, but sometimes you can go from testing back to ideate, from prototype back to ideate. You can move from testing and go back to define, or you can move from test go back to empathize. So this is what we call nonlinear. If it was a linear, it would be from empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, then finish. You wouldn't have the opportunity to go back. But with this, you can always go back and forth. You can even go to ideate and then realize something is missing, go back to empathize. And that is how iteration works. So it is important to note that the 5 stages are not always sequential, so they do not have to follow any specific order, and they can often occur in parallel and be repeated iteratively. As such, the stage should be understood as different modes that contribute to a project rather than sequential steps. Although in our assignment, we'll be going sequentially just for the case of understanding and coming up with the product at the end of the semester. But actually, in real sense, we use design thinking not in a linear mode, but with iterations. However, the amazing thing about the 5 stages design thinking model is that it systematizes and identifies the 5 stages modes you would expect to carry out in a design project and in any innovation process, any innovation problem solving project. Every project will involve activities specific to the product under development, but the central idea behind each stage remains the same. So like the idea is the same, but you can move always, but you know exactly what you're looking for at every stage. So I'm going to give an example, especially based on your assignment, where in my case I choose the farming community, the maize farming community, and in empathize I will visit them so I can develop a deep understanding of what they're going through. I will visit them. I will ask them questions on how they do maize farming, where they're sourcing their seeds, if they have market, if they have expertise, just understanding the process, being there physically. And then in the define stage, I will clearly put down all the issues that I identified during the empathize. And then here I will pick one problem that I will solve. And in my case, I will solve the lack of knowledge. They are farming, yes, but maybe during empathize, I realize they are not aware of many things. They don't know where to sell, but also they don't have a good knowledge on how to farm their crops. That's why they're not getting high yields. So in the define stage, I will really choose that one problem which I'm going to solve. And then in the ideate, I will come up with ideas. So when we say they don't have farming knowledge, in the ideate, I can have 3 solutions to that problem. First, maybe I can organize trainings and workshops. Second, maybe I can first maybe I can organize trainings and workshops for the farmers. Second, maybe I can organize training and workshop for the extension officers so that they can train the farmers. And third, maybe I can come up with a digital platform which we can put knowledge where farmers themselves and extension officers can always learn through that digital platform. So I can have 3 alternatives, and then in the 3 alternatives, I will choose one. So in my case, I have 3 alternatives: organizing training for the farmers, organizing training for the extension officers, and building a digital platform that will have the knowledge which can be accessed by all farmers and extension officers. So in my case, I will choose the most priority will be building a digital platform. So I will take that solution, go to prototype. Now I will start drawing on paper. I will draw how this solution will be, how this platform will be, and then put the link between the different components of this solution. So I will know what features will be there. And then with that drawing, I will go back to the community and explain to them what I intend to do. They will give my inputs, whether they like the system or not, what they think should be included and what should be excluded. After getting comments from them, I will build now the digital platform, the prototype now in digital form, and then now I will move to testing. Now when I go to testing, I will go with it as if it's the final product, and I will charge for it, even if it's a very small amount of money. And then we will see how many are now converting into become customers and they're ready to use the product and pay for the product. So roughly that is what we are going to be doing with our assignment. And once we follow this step, by the end, we will be able to have a product and we'll be able to test it and get money out of it. So make sure your product is sellable to at least one person, but make sure you follow this process the way that I have explained. So, so this is the end of this session, and I wish you all the best.